I always believed that my journey was going to be successful. I wasn't afraid to fall down and get up and wipe myself off and start all over again. There's a song like that. But I just felt that that was the norm. You know, if you don't succeed at something right away and you fall down, you get up. And if you keep doing that, your whole life you will be successful.
His body of work has seen enough success to encompass several lifetimes. He's an actor, singer, goodwill ambassador, and a gentleman. Jimmy Borges.
Long Story Short with Leslie Wilcox is Hawaii's first weekly television program produced and broadcast in high definition.
Aloha, I'm Leslie Wilcox. When a song is recognized as being a standard, it's a song that's at the top of its game, one that maintains its popularity through generations and is relevant whether it's being interpreted by Frank Sinatra or Lady Gaga. Our spotlight tonight shines on an artist who is a standard by any definition of the word. His career has spanned generations. His voice is classic yet unique, and his grace and professionalism are a model for anyone in any career. He is Jimmy Borges.
Night and day, under the height of me. Oh, what a hungry yearning deep inside of me.
So you started off life in Kalihi, but
Yes.
you didn't stay there.
No, I didn't. To me, Kalihi was the world, you know, because I played football in the streets. I climbed the mango tree in my backyard, and I would sit up there and eat the mangoes all day and eat the vivees and the sour sap and the guavas. And
What street did you live on in Kalihi?
Self Lane. It was right across from the Kalihi fire station. And I was a premature baby, so Mrs. Self, they named the street after her father, Captain Self. And she was my mother's midwife. So she delivered me. I was a preemie.
She delivered you at home?
At home. I was like about 7.5 to 8 months, not even 8 months. And I remember my mother telling me that my first bed was a cigar box. So she said I would fit in her hand, the palm of her hand. And I think I don't think they had incubators at that time. But I got very lucky, I survived, you know.
And you have the lungs.
And I have the lungs, the singing lungs.
Because preemies don't have developed lungs, right?
Exactly, yeah. No, everything worked out fine. I have no idea, but my mother was very adamant that Jimmy's going to live. Jimmy the third was going to live.
What were your parents like?
My mother was a typical Chinese Hawaiian lady that stayed at home and chatted with the neighbors. And my dad was kind of like a rake. He was very handsome and had a little thin mustache and always drinking with the guys, you know, drinking the Primo beer and hanging with the guys. He was sort of a guy type guy. And my mother was more a homemaker. So that was my basic background. Not too, unique, but music was always in my life. My mother brought music. My father played the piano and the ukulele by ear. You know, everything was by ear. And so I always had music around me. I always liked it. I didn't realize that I would move into that direction.
What kind of music was in your life? What did your father play?
My dad, strangely enough, was the Portuguese side of the family. He loved the Hawaiian things. He loved to sing the Hawaiian things and play it on the piano.
And your mom?
And my mother was a big band aficionado. And we got those records. We had those, what they called V records from the military guys during World War II. I was 6.5 when the war started, so I was already, pretty aware of what's going on. But when all the GIs were here, my mother and her two aunties, young aunties, opened up a hot dog stand on King Street in South Lane. And now my mother was only 17 when I was born. So at the age of about 8, my mother's only like about 25, and so she's pretty hot. And she looked really, and then my aunties looked pretty good. And so they were selling these hot dogs. Well, the GIs were coming by in their trucks, and they could care less about the hot dogs. They wanted to see these 3 hot little, local girls that were selling it. they would bring them gifts, and the gifts would be like what they called V records, and those were those big records that were made for the GIs. And on it were the big bands like Tommy Dorsey and Jimmy Dorsey and Frank Sinatra and all that. My mother would play it, and I got really involved listening to those big band sounds. That was my first inkling at that time that I realized that I liked that kind of music. The classic music of Cole Porter and George Gershwin and all that. I didn't know these people's names. I just knew that music took more of a hold on me than the Hawaiian music. I like the Hawaiian music, but I love the big band music.
So we can thank the GIs of World War II for introducing Jimmy Borges to big band music. But isn't it intriguing to imagine Jimmy Borges singing Hawaiian music, or for that matter, playing professional football? So you're listening to records at home, but you're also out on the streets playing ball,
Oh, yeah.
and you love sports.
Sports was my whole life. We would play tackle in the street, and that was part of,
Road rash?
Yeah, you got road rash, but that was part of the whole thing, the guys, this was part of what? Complete tackle, man. And so me and Gilbert, and I remember all the guys' names on South Lane, they were my buddies. In fact, a few of them still contact me now through email. But sports was my whole life. All I cared about was football, because we really didn't have baseball back at that time. Baseball wasn't a real big thing in Hawaii. And no soccer. And basketball was, they were secondary or tertiary sports. Football was the thing, because that was a real
And you
manly
played
sport.
tackle, you said?
No, I was a running back, but we played tackle football
So
on the
you were
street.
fast?
I was fast and played high school ball at 160 pounds, but the thing that got me by and that I got my accolades from was my speed and my moves. And that all came from my hero. One of my heroes was Herman Wiedemeyer. He went to St. Louis, I went to St. Louis, and he was a great football player. And I tried to emulate.
Was he a little older than you?
12 years.
Oh, 12 years.
Yeah, because he was in the 12th grade when I was in the first grade. But he was like one of my heroes. I would go to every football game that St. Louis played. And I would watch him and watch the way he ran and the way he juked and all this different. And I learned from that. And when I played high school ball in the mainland, I was playing against some pretty big guys and fast guys, but I learned I was fast. And that was the secret to my success. And I got a football scholarship to go to college and all that. I wanted to continue on in sports. And then I realized that sports, it was a dead end. And, it wasn't that satisfying. I wanted to be, growing up, I wanted to be someone. I wanted to be somebody.
Football's loss was music's gain. Jimmy's drive to be somebody gave him a focus that would determine the rest of his life. For Jimmy Borges, it wasn't about fame or celebrity. It was about living a worthwhile life.
I got the world on a string, I'm sitting on a rainbow. I've got that string around my finger. What a world, what a life, I'm in love.
I wanted my existence to be important. I wanted to be important in some way or another, as long as I did something that was worthwhile in life. I wanted to do something worthwhile, not just to be sand on the beach. And I always had that drive. It wasn't an ego. It wasn't an ego thing. It was a thing that if it was necessary. I always believed from the time that I was young that if you're going to be here, do something important. I don't care whatever it happened to be. So if it was going to be in sports, be the best that you can be. If it was going to be in anything, be the best that you can be. And so that was always my thrust. And it held me in good stead, because when I went to the mainland, I had to overcome things that I never realized existed, which was prejudice. I didn't realize that people might not like you because you were brown.
What did they think you were?
They had no idea.
What did you tell them?
When I was in Los Angeles, I was Mexican. When I was in Florida, I was Puerto Rican. When I was in upper New York State, my buddies were Italian, so they thought I was a funny-looking Sicilian. I mean, hey, what you doing, Jimmy? You know? And I'm walking around with my Italian buddies like that. So they looked at me, and it was exotic, right? I didn't realize that became a plus in my career, jumping ahead to my career as a singer, because it set me apart. What I thought was going to be a negative, because whenever I auditioned when I was younger, you had to either be black or white. They said, what does a Hawaiian know about jazz? I like it, and I just like it. So I had to audition, and it took longer for the buyer to pay attention to me.
Because they weren't looking for you.
No, because I didn't fit. And this is before Don Ho or anything. Hawaii, the only thing anybody ever knew, this is in the 50s, knew about Hawaii was Pearl Harbor, before Hawaii 5-0. Pearl Harbor or Diamond Head, you know, or Harry Owens, which was an old show. But they had, you know, there was no other connection. So if I auditioned and there was some black guys there and some white guys here and this Hawaiian guy over here, I was given short shrift many, many times.
You didn't fit in either category.
Yeah, and so I had to work harder. And so I learned at that age that equality was not guaranteed. And that's okay.
And you didn't get discouraged. You just worked harder.
No, it made me mad. And says, okay, I'll show you. That was mine.
How do you get mad and use it for your advantage without being bitter? How do you do that?
I never had time to be bitter. That never even occurred to me. My whole thing was always that I'll show you. And you know where that started from? That started from going back to this prejudice thing. I had a girlfriend in school, and I was just so crazy
Is this
about
college?
her. No, this high school.
High school,
High
okay.
school. And I was just crazy about her. And she was so cute and so pretty. Her name was Virginia. And I was going to marry her, and we were going to have children, and that was going to be my life, you know, to spend the rest of my life with her. When we started talking about marriage, of course, that was like my junior year in school, you know how kids are. The parents told her, she says, you know, if you marry Jimmy, your children will be brown. And I said, and? So, it just never bothered me, but it bothered her. And because that wasn't fitting into the social mode and that they were acclimated to. And then I realized that it affected my life. My thought, I got upset and it hurt me at first. And then, not too long after, I decided, you know what? You're going to be sorry. One day you're going to be sorry that you weren't my wife, or you're going to be sorry that I wasn't in your life. And that just gave me more impetus to be something, to show. And strange things happen to give you, you know, drive, and that I used that.
It could easily have been taken a different way,
Oh,
but you used
yeah.
it for the positive.
I just used it as I'm going to be somebody, and you're gonna wish you were my friend.
Okay, now, did that ever happen? Did she ever regret?
Well, you know, with those same people, there were other people like that. When the time did come and they saw me and I was successful in San Francisco and over here, it never occurred to me to be that way. I was more gracious to them than I probably was to anybody else, because it didn't matter.
You were beyond that. You're not an I told you so guy.
No, it didn't matter. And because if it wasn't for them, maybe I might not have been here. Maybe my drive might not have been as strong.
Okay, so you're at college, you've decided your sports is not
No.
going to happen for you because it's a dead end. So then what happened?
There was a transition there. There was a girl that I was going with, and her name was Ann Richards. She's gone now, but she was, at that time, a very well-known local singer. She had already started a singing career when she was like 16 or so. So she was my girlfriend in college, and she heard me sing you know, when we were at home together or out on a date together. And she said, why don't you come and sing at one of our college rallies? And at the college rallies, some of the people that went to school there at San Francisco State was Johnny Mathis, Cal Tjader, Paul Desmond, all these great classical, legendary artists. And that's the people I went to school with. So I sang at some college rallies with them, and they applauded. And I said, hey.
That feels good.
I really like that. It's like what it did, it took the place of scoring a touchdown. I like that idea.
And it didn't hurt as much
No,
when things went bad.
I didn't have to, because I was one of those jocks that didn't want to wear the face mask. You know, said that's only for sissies. Well, my face was always beat up. You know, I had road rash, and my whole face had bruises and all that, all during football season. I didn't have to do this anymore. People applauded. Not only that, the girls were there too. The same thing. I still have the girls.
Girls are a theme here so far.
I was very, very much into, I love women. I absolutely love women. In fact, some of my best friends are women. And the reason for that is that I learned a lot from women. I learned things from women that I would never learn from men.
For example?
Well, they're nurturers. Women are very strong. They're very strong in a very soft, gentle way. And I like that because that's kind of my nature. I'm a gentle person in my dealings with people, but I'm very strong also, and I like that about women. And I learned a lot about women because of their nurturing aspect. And, you know, they're a Mother Earth. Men aren't that way. Men are testosterone, you know, and everything is banging heads and all that. That's okay. That's fine in its place. But that's not what life is all about.
For every Jimmy Borges who makes it, there are hundreds of singers who never do. Sometimes the difference between success and failure is perseverance.
How did you get your first break, big break?
I created my own breaks many times. I would go to clubs. I would audition at any audition that I found out about. And if I didn't make it, it would say, you're lost. That was my mentality, you know. That was the safeguard. I didn't want to get down. I would go to clubs and sit in. One club I went to, I went and sat in, and I thought about this then. I sent up a note, said, hi, my name is Jimmy Borges. I'm looking for a band to take with me to Las Vegas. And I never asked to sing. I just sent it up to them. And I know that the guys are going to say, hey, there's this guy out there that he's going to go to Las Vegas and he's looking for a band. Let's call him up. Of course, and that's how I got up on stage and sang. Sometimes when I sang, they hired me. Sometimes, most times they didn't. But sometimes they hired me. And that's how I got some of my first jobs.
Was it hard to make a living in the beginning?
Very hard.
How'd you do it? How'd you make things, how'd you get by?
I would take like a small little job. I would work for my uncle for about maybe 2 weeks. He was a butcher, and I would work on a Saturday for him for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then make enough money to go out so that I could buy drinks at a nightclub and audition. And that was basically the MO. Whatever money I had coming in, I would save for gas, so I had to drive to all these clubs. I just went to any club that had live music.
Is this while you were in college or after college?
Before college and after, during that period of time. I became a professional full-on at the age of 20, because then that's when I started working steady. I started getting jobs.
Now, did you ever finish college?
No.
You're already on your way.
Strictly a cup of coffee in college. That was it. You know, after football season I left, because football didn't do what I needed to do for me, and singing did. Singing was coming into play.
So you could support yourself at age 20 with singing in San Francisco?
It didn't take that much anymore. I could cross I was living in Oakland, and I go across the San Francisco Bay Bridge for 25 cents. It was a quarter, and now it's like $4. And drinks, I could buy a drink for, I would nurse one drink, and it would be, 85 cents, something like that.
No, the nightlife scene has destroyed many a person as far as gotten them down the wrong path and really blocked their chances of success because of habits and people and did you ever fall victim or fall prey to that?
No. And there were reasons for it. First of all, I didn't like what drinking did to me. But secondly, it might be my Chinese blood that's in me. Whenever I drank anything, I would turn red. I would get red. And I never liked that, you know. But I didn't like the feeling that it gave me. I didn't like...
Which is exactly why most people drink, because they love the feeling.
I like the feeling, and I didn't like that. Part of it is, I guess I'm a control freak. In fact, I am. The truth is, I am. And being a control freak was necessary for me to follow my dream, to follow what I had to do, and to stay on course. I needed to be as focused as possible. And then once I got started in the business, I needed to have control over my musicians to make sure that they did what they were supposed to do and they supported me, because the most important people in my life, in my professional life, are my musicians. I'm only as good as they make me. Oh, otherwise I'm better off singing a cappella. But I needed that to control them. They can drink and do whatever they want, but as long as they were staying within the concept of my music and what I wanted, that was fine.
What about peer pressure? People going, hey, come on, Jimmy, we go drinking. We're going to do this, we're going to do that.
That was hard at certain points in my life to try to keep up with the Joneses, you know, because most of them had money or more money than I did. Playing football, I never had my own football shoes. They were second hand-me-downs from my friends. In high school, I never had my own never had my own baseball cleats. I had to borrow suits to go to the prom, you know, and it felt wow, you know, even if it was too large. But it was a suit, you know, that kind of thing. But it was no big deal. It really wasn't a big deal. I never thought of it as being that I was, you know, ever in a position of being second or third class. It just was okay.
Secondhand football cleats, a borrowed suit. Out of these humble beginnings, and how often do we say that about some of Hawaii's most successful people, came a man who not only sings with elegance, he lives his life with grace.
Did you always have, or if not, when did you pick it up, this sense of style and grace that you have?
That's an interesting question. I enjoyed emulating, using that word again, people that I found to be important, I guess, because I wanted to be important. So if I saw somebody who was a gentleman, but he would take off his cape and he would take off his clothes and he had a cape underneath. I saw different things in different people. I saw the strength in gentle people when I saw how people acted in their approach to life. I saw the gentility and the strength. And I would see this kind of thing in different people, whether it was in the movies or people that I saw in life. And that's how I tried to emulate. And I saw that they didn't have to yell and scream, and that they could speak properly and in complete sentences, and that it was much more powerful to be softer than it is to be louder, many times. And I learned this without having it taught to me. It was like osmosis. Things happened, it just came into me. And that's the kind of person I became. In fact, that was part of my music when I first started singing, and I needed to be a little bit more aggressive because I sang very gently, and I needed sometimes to attack more, and I had to learn that.
Who told you that, or did you just figure it out, I got to be stronger on these certain songs?
Well, sometimes some told me that I needed to pay more attention to the content of the song. I was told that by a band leader. And when I started watching or paying attention to other singers that I saw the use of dynamics. And I use dynamics a lot in my singing. I bring it down to a very soft, gentle song, or sometimes I just whack them over the head. And there are times for both of those, because I found out that there's power in gentility in everything in life, not just music.
The truly gifted singers take their audiences on a journey, one that taps deep emotions and connects with each and every listener. For Jimmy Borges, that talent would serve him through generations of fans, and that connection would come back to reward him in the most challenging time of his life. On our next Long Story Short, we'll hear Jimmy talk about his battle with liver cancer and how fans who were touched by his music came back to support him. For Long Story Short and PBS Hawaii, I'm Leslie Wilcox. Ahui ho.
For audio and written transcripts of this program and all episodes of Long Story Short with Leslie Wilcox, visit pbshawaii.org.
A sad song can be a happy song, or a happy song can be a sad song. Example, happy days are here again, the skies above are blue again. And then you put that in a minor, and it becomes, happy days are here again, the skies above are blue again, da-da-dee-da-da, and cheer again. Happy days are here again. Well, they're not, you know, that's sad. But that's the same song, same words, and all that, but it can be done. That's the power of music.